Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now have with us the personality, a rare personality indeed, who breathes the air of entrepreneurship all the time. Yes, I'm talking about Shri Mahavir Pratap Sharma, ex chairman, TIE Global. He's going to talk to us about from startup to enterprise. Shri Mahavir Pratap Sharma, it's all yours.
Hello everyone, it's always a pleasure and an honor to be part of TiECon in Hubli. Hubli has always been an exemplary town when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to startup ecosystem. My visit in Hubli was totally enlightening, totally inspiring with such great colleges, great labs and incubation centers, great acceleration programs, the sandbox and whatnot. And all the members and all the team members at TiE Hubli have really evangelized and worked towards creating a great environment for startups and entrepreneurship in Hubli. So while everyone is here at TiECon, I thank everyone in TiE Hubli to have done what they have done for Hubli and for TiE globally, and also wish everyone attending TiECon the very best. Because of my experience as an angel investor for the last 7-8 years and having traveled and looked at startup and pitching competitions across the globe, I really feel that talking about a startup journey is critical. Most everyone knows what a startup journey should be, but what I would like to emphasize is what I have in my journey seen, what goes wrong with most startups at various stages. So I'll quickly try to rattle off and talk about a startup journey and pause for a little longer where I think these startups have done something wrong. So obviously, the most critical thing for any startup to start is creating the right team, the right co-founders, finding the right people. Obviously, you can't just choose people that you like, the people that you have studied with, the people that you worked with. You need to have people from each and every domain and to work with each other. Obviously, the team also does have to fit to what the problem that you're trying to solve. So the parallel thing that happens between finding the right team, which is the co-founders, and also finding the right problem and solution are very critical, and they both happen at the same time because one has to work with the other. It just cannot be a group of people deciding that we'll work together, or a problem with a solution not having the right team. So these two things I think have to have work together. What I have seen people do wrong is not finding the right problem and solution that all of you collectively can solve. So what happens is, just because you've been friends, just because I have done engineering and you've done marketing and someone else is good at creative, you just become part of it and you don't know sectors or domains that you will try and solve. So it's very important that you have deep knowledge of the subject matter and all of you bring something to the table so that you can work together, not just coming together and then thinking of a problem or a solution is what I feel. So it has to work parallelly, it has to work together, it has to work in tandem. That's one thing that I've seen go wrong. Now, obviously, finding a problem and the right solution is the most obvious thing that any startup has to do, and most actually everyone does. Everyone finds a problem, everyone has a unique solution, or everyone has a unique way to solve the problem, which is great. But what happens is, collectively, while you are the right team to do that, you need to have certain things that you need to know. One is that the fact that you might have looked at a problem, you might have looked at a solution, but are people ready for it? Is the market ready for it? Is it the right time to do it? It's not that easy, because at times I've seen startups been there before the market is ready for it, or sometimes too late for the market to be ready. So it's very critical that you understand and you look at things when the time is right. So if some problem or solution has been in the market, but you feel that you have a better solution, there's no better time. So it's not just the early mover advantage, it's not just doing things first. It's also very critical that when something has scaled up to a point and you have something similar in a different way that you're trying to solve, it's okay to have that, so long as you have the bandwidth, the team, and the technology behind it to do that better. So it's very important for you to do a lot of research in the market. What is your competition? And competition, just not direct competition. Every time I see a pitch deck, I see direct competition. You have to see indirect competition. You have to see competition that people might from other fields can join in or acquire. So it's very, very critical to do an in-depth research. You need to reach out to your customers, your paying customers and your non-paying customers, and we'll talk a little later about the paying and the non-paying customers and what I mean by that. But it's very critical that you see what is the timing has to be right. I have seen startups fail because they were too early. I have seen startups fail because they were too late and everyone had scaled up to a point where they could not. Or I have seen startups fail where other people have pivoted into what they were doing and taken up the market because they've been in the market before. So it's very critical to have the right timing for everything, which is very important. It comes with research and analyzing your competition and your customers, whether paying or non-paying. Of course, the team we've spoken about. The other thing I've seen is once you have the right team, the right problem, the right solution, you've done your research in the market, now you need to be prepared to launch it. You just cannot do this in the hurry because someone else might do it. You really have to work your way through and prepare. I've seen half-baked, half-cooked ideas in the market which then don't follow through, and that's very critical because it's very important that you are totally prepared before you go to anyone for fundraising, before you go to customers and provide them the UI, UX, or the whatever you're trying to sell, the product that you're trying to sell. It's very critical that you actually have the preparedness with the right product and the right usage. Obviously, you will change. Obviously, you will continue to edit. Obviously, you will continue to improve the experience, but you need to have something that I don't get turned off the first time I come and use your product or your service or whatever you have to. So these are very basic things that I'm sure most of you do it, but sometimes your timing or your preparedness and the right team for the right problem is not there. So that's very, very critical. Now, obviously, everyone knows that you got to build a prototype if it's a product or a service, and you have to build the back end, the app, the website, whatever it needs. You need to have a proof of concept. You need to go out and go to your town, go to whatever customers you have, B2B, B2C, whatever, and try and see if it works. Would people pay you for this? So all of this should happen in parallel. So amongst your team, someone is developing the product, someone is improving the UI and UX, someone is doing a proof of concept and seeing whether that will work or not. So all this happens in parallel, and that's why the team is very, very critical. Now, the other important part is while all this is happening, all this is evolving, fundraising becomes a very, very important thing, and I think I would like to emphasize more on that because everything else I've seen people, startups do mostly. You really have to start to create your own pitch right now at this point in time also. You need to understand how much money you need. You need to understand the cash flow. You need to understand where and who you need to go. And when I'm saying preparing a pitch, it's not just a PowerPoint. It's not just making an Excel with all the numbers in it and the cash flow and the cash required and the sales or revenues that you might generate. You need to start to research. Where is it that you have to go and pitch? Which are the right angel investors for you? Do you have to be part of an incubation program? Do you have to be part of an accelerator program? Do you have to be part of an organization that will help you? So all these are very, very critical. A lot of depth is required, and I will talk about the right angel at a later point, but I think it's very, very critical that someone starts to work on the pitch. I've seen people work on the product and service, and because you're short on people, or because you don't have time, you start to do the pitch much later. Or sometimes people make a pitch at the idea stage. Idea stage pitches are okay if you have an IP-able product. If you have a product that no one else has, if you have a product that can get a patent, yes, you need to start to pitch at an idea stage or a prototype stage, which is fine. But if you don't have a product or a service which is IP-able, I strongly feel that you need to get into a situation where POC and a product has to be ready. Customers have to be there, paid and non-paid both. So it's very, very critical that you work parallelly on the pitch, unless, of course, it's an IP-able product. The other thing that I have seen is while you're preparing for the pitch, preparing how to pitch is very critical. I think the storytelling of a startup and why this startup and why you are the right people and why you will succeed and others people will not succeed. Just merely saying that you have the best product or the cheapest product or you have an early mover advantage doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's obvious that I know if there's no one in the market, you have an early mover advantage. I know all these things. I need to know more. I need to know more why you and why not someone else. Why not someone else can come after you and do that. So all that preparation of a pitch is very, very critical. And I think that's something very important. And for IPable products, you can start at idea stage or prototype stage. If it's not an IPable product, you will have to start after POC. But if you are following someone or someone is already doing something and you're doing it better, cheaper, quicker, easier, whatever the adjective that you want to use, you really need to have revenues and month-on-month growth in revenues. It doesn't work just by you saying that my product is better, cheaper, people will use more. You really have to show me numbers to convince me that you will be better than the competition that already exists, a company or a startup that has already been funded. So it's very, very critical that you have the numbers to back your, whatever you might want to call it, service or product, and it's very, very critical. The other thing I've seen something amiss is when you are trying to pitch. Sometimes people try to have a set format of pitching. You should not have a set format of pitching. Pitching, the first 2-3 slides should be your most important slides, whether it's the product or service that you've made, whether it's the growth month on month that you have, whether it's the IP that you have, whether it's the team collectively that you have by way of education or by way of experience that you have collected. Whatever is the most important thing in your startup, that should be part of the first 2-3 minutes or 2-3 slides. Otherwise, when investors see so many pitches, when you reach out to any of us or any platform, you really will not have me attentive if your first 2-3 pitches are talking about a problem, solution, and something that everyone does. So your first 2-3 pitches should make me feel wow and want me to know more, and that's when I will see the 10 other slides that you've made out of in your pitching. So it's very, very critical that you have the right pitch. Obviously, market size, in all these things are important, but they're not critical. Cash flow, you should have all these things in the back end. It's not required on a slide. If you're making a product or service that I know the world is using, the world will use, I don't need the market size. I know the world is a market for a shirt. I know a world is a market for any kind of service. I know how many school students there are. I know how many rural India constituents we have. So all that is not needed if you have a very generic product. If you have very high-tech, specific use, cancer of certain area and a device that you've created to detect that, yes, then I need to know the market, because everyone does not know the exact size of the market at that point. So very, very important. Don't waste your slides. Don't waste your energy in a pitching competition. Don't waste your time on a slide that does not hold my interest or something that I already know. Be prepared with it if I do ask, but you always have to be have that in the value. The last thing that I wanted to say is, be sure of how much money you need. Your finance or a CFO or whatever, whoever is looking at that should know the numbers at the back of his or her hand. You really need to understand how much money you need, why you need, what if you don't get this money, what if you get less money, what if you get more money. All these answers have to be absolutely clear, crystal clear, and this will not come. You can't fool an investor. You really have to live the business that you are in. You really have to know the numbers that you are in, otherwise you will not be able to convince an investor. So it's very, very critical that you know your cash flow, money that you need, why do you need, and what if you're not able to raise all of it, and what if you're not able to raise nothing of it. So your roadmap, plan A, plan B, plan C, without money or with less money should be ready, and you should have answers to that. Valuation has always been a challenge for early stage and idea stage companies. How do you derive the right valuation? And then there are multiple formulas, but I feel there's not a single formula that works, because if there's a mismatch between what I think your valuation should be or what you think your valuation is, it will always be a problem situation. So I really feel that two different people should work on valuation and the money required. Money required should be based upon what you need to achieve whatever you want to achieve in 12 months to 18 months. Simple as that. That should have nothing to do with the valuation. The valuation on the other hand, it can be outsourced to an agency and see what the valuation is, or you can actually see what other companies have done, what competition has done, what revenues you are projecting, what profits you're projecting, and why the valuation should be an X amount and not a Y amount. And if your fund requirement and your valuation matches and you're about to dilute 8 to 12% of your equity and that matches with the valuation, I would say borderline, and the chances are that you're in the right parameter because you've not compromised the money that you required or the cash flow needed with the valuation that you deserve because of the competition and your revenues, etc., etc. It should not be done through an accountancy firm where they match because they want to give out 8 to 10% of the cash flow that they need, or multiply the money that you need by 10 times and create a valuation. That should not be the case. If that comes to our mind as investors, becomes difficult. So startups really need to be good with their numbers. Other than the product and service that they're creating in the back end and the technology, it's very critical for you can't progress without funding. And your maths and your cash flow has to be very, very critical when it comes to funding. I would also like to emphasize that while the co-founder match, when I said earlier, is very critical, the first investor, the first match or the first check that is written or the first network that you go to or the first fund that you go to is very critical. You really have to do your due diligence. You have to have the right set of investors because these first investors are like your extended family. They will be mentoring, they will be hand-holding, they will be guiding, they will be telling you when you need to pivot or not, or they will be getting the next round of funding because that is what the first check is. So this while your co-founders are your siblings and you're creating a family of brothers and sisters and teammates, your first set of investor is like a parent to you. He or she should be a good person, not only giving the money, a strategic investor who should understand the domain, who should be some sort of an expert in whatever you need help in, whether it's marketing or branding, whether it's technology, whether it's go-to-market strategy, whatever that might be. You really need to have the right and intelligent money, and that's very, I think, very critical. People go wrong in their pursuit to raise money and not have the right money. So it's very critical. I would take lesser money from someone if he or she brings more value, or if the network that he or she is coming with, or a set of investors is better than one investor, because all these people will bring their experience, will bring this thing. Obviously, there will be one person on the board. You don't want too much interference. You don't want an investor that is too interfering or too dominating, but you do need an investor who's available when you reach out to them. It's very, 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 very critical. So I think it's very important. The other thing that I've seen many startups get fooled by all the glamorous fundraising that happens is that, if your motto or if your role is to just raise the money, or you're starting a startup because you want to raise money one after the other, it will not work. You really have to believe in the idea. You really should feel and have this passion that you will continue to grow this idea into a business and not just, the startup to an enterprise only happens if the co-founders believe in the idea and they think that this will be something that they will do for the rest of their lives. If they feel that they want to do it for next 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years and get out of it and make money, it normally will not succeed because your vision is very small. You're not building tools or blocks. Building blocks are so shallow or so narrow that they don't take you beyond 4 to 5 years. So it's very critical that you create the right environment, the right product, the right service, or a right company which has the vision to go into decades, because that is the only... See, the fundraising is required, but fundraising is not an aim. It happens on its own. While you are growing, fundraising will happen. Funds will come in. But if your goalpost is fundraise 1, fundraise 2, fundraise 3 and exit, it will not work. You should actually build a company that is strong enough that someone would want to buy, someone would want to merge with, someone would want to take further, and that's very, very critical. Otherwise, it will not work. So I think that mindset is very, very critical. Don't go start a startup because you want to raise money and exit in 5, 7 years. You really need to work very, very critically in creating a business that will work for a lifetime and compete with the best across the world. The world has shrunk. It's no longer just India-centric or Asia-centric. There could be a startup in the US that can enter India, and your market could be the US tomorrow. So it's very, very critical that you understand that, you believe in the problem and the idea that you have to know. And that's how you need to work. Now, from a startup, funding, early stage, mentoring, hand-holding, POC, revenues, growth, 2 years of the company. Now, how to build an enterprise. The quality and the purpose, the vision, while it has to be long-term, it's a tough journey. Startup journey might seem very lucrative to many people, but startups that are bootstrapped, startups that are not able to raise next round of funding, it's a very, very tough journey. So you should be ready to put in your time, energy, knowledge, everything into it, and it's very, very critical. If you don't do that, it will not work in the long run. So it's very, very critical that you are ready for a long ride, which is strong and tough. Also, you should be very, very agile. You should be able to pivot, because technology is very dynamic. I mean, it's a fast-changing world. There's new things, technologies coming in. You should learn to adapt. You should learn to quickly pivot. You should learn to accept that you've done wrong and do corrective measures. You should be okay to piggyback ride on other businesses and work in collaboration with other businesses that are not conflicting with yours. You should be okay to merge or acquire if need be at a growth stage. All these things are very, very critical to big a decent empire, or to bring a strong enterprise which can work. You know, the other thing I've also seen in many startups go wrong is customer satisfaction. And I'll tell you, there are two sets of customers, and we sometimes disregard the customers. So most startups or most ideas have a set of customers that are free, that don't pay you anything, but there are people who pay you for those customers. Both the set of customers are very, very critical. So for example, a social media, so let's Facebook, they have people who pay revenue, who pay for ads. That's their money making. As end users, it's free for me. If I was not happy with the Facebook user interface or experience, I would cease to be on Facebook. What would happen? The revenue would go down. Similarly, a restaurant app, let's say, while the restaurant is paying you for what you are giving to that restaurant, but unless the consumer that is using the app is not happy with the app that is being used, though I'm not a direct consumer, and unless I download that part of it, my restaurant will stop paying. Which is very, very critical that you focus on both sets of customers, the one where the revenue is coming from, the reason why the revenue is coming from. And I've seen many people only focus on one or the other. So they say, oh, increase downloads, and they will increase downloads and they will not worry about people who are paying revenue. They need to be happy. Sometimes, oh, I don't have to care. I have to get revenue from my customers. So it's very, very critical that you work on both sides equally, because they're both very, very critical. Otherwise, you sometimes don't grow. So I think it's very, very important. It's very, very critical that you have long sets of processes and policies in place, compliance is in place, governance in place, and that's when a startup, after a year or two of funding, will grow into a much larger organization and probably create an impact within the country or across the globe. And that's what creates a journey. And having, even when you're hiring people, even when you're hiring your teammates, other than the co-founders, you really have to have the right team members, because growth requires quality team. Growth requires team that is better than you. You really do require to go from point A to point B, and you need right kind of team members for that. The right quality is needed. So all that, think like a huge enterprise. Even when you are post your first round of funding, it's very, very critical. So I think the journey of a startup to an enterprise needs a good base, a strong team, a very, very good investment at the first stage, right direction and right mentoring and right hand-holding, and continuing to give the right experience to its customers, both paying and non-paying, and then grow from there. And that is what I feel would create a better enterprise, and successful startup will go from being just a startup or an idea stage to a successful entrepreneur and succeed across the globe. So I wish all of you the very best. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Sharma, what are the factors normally an investor looks into before putting his money in a startup?
See, as an investor, I look at many things. Obviously, don't want to repeat the fact that the co-founders and the team is very, very critical. I think that I don't want to repeat, but I think when I am being pitched at or I am being reached out at, post the team, I'm looking at the idea. I'm not only looking at the idea that you've come up with, but how are you going to implement that idea? What is your go-to-market strategy? What is the cost of customer acquisition? What if you're not able to raise money? I mean, I look at an investment, whether this investment is scalable, whether this idea is going to be viral. Can people refer this to other people to use this product or service? Do I really need to pay a lot to acquire customers? What is the life cycle of my customer? If I am acquiring a customer for 100 rupees, how soon am I recovering that 100 rupees? Whether this team is fit for a B2B model or a B2C model or a B2BC model or whatever that is. So it's really, as an investor, I look thoroughly at everything that you have to project. Also, I think we as investors are very, very clear. I mean, we see any red flag amongst 15, 20 parameters that we are questioning you on, we just back off. It's very, very easy for us to say no. We have multiple options in the same domain coming our way, and we really need to choose the right thing. So you have to really be very, very focused and clear and not have any red flags. I think if you can work in a manner that works in tandem and your growth model is right and everything else works in our mind is very important. Other thing that you have, as a startup, you have to be very clear, or you should know, is that every investor is not ready for you. I mean, I might have invested in a similar domain, I might have lost money in that domain, or I might have too much exposure in that sector and I don't not interested. It's okay if an investor says no. It doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with you. So don't get me wrong there. And it's not just the timing for the product or idea for the market, it's also timing from me as an investor point of view. Some funds have allocated, or some investors have said, I will sector-wise not go beyond a certain percentage of my total investment size. So it's multiple things that are playing in the mind of the investor, and it's simple matchmaking. It really has to work for you, as in the sense that I'm the right investor for you, and it has to work for me, that you are the right team, the right idea at the right time, and the right startup. So it's a lot of give and take, it's lots of questions, it's a lot of information that you need to have and we need to know, and we need to be sure that whatever is being shared, you will execute and you are the right people to execute that.
Mr. Sharma, in your view, what is the true success of an entrepreneur?
See, as an entrepreneur, good returns versus sustainability and growth, I think both are important. I don't think that as human beings, if we stop to evolve, if we stop to learn, we would be doing justice to our lives. And similarly, if we did not have the money or revenues coming our way, we would not be able to live or survive or have the bandwidth to acquire and grow. So I think same is the case with an entrepreneur, like an individual. So you really need to have growth. You really need to have sustainability, because without profitability, you cannot sustain for long. Gone are the days when burning money perpetually was okay. You really have to have a sustainable model, a workable model, a model that is growing month on month or year on year, and also have returns coming the way of the investors, returns coming your way. It's very, very critical that you balance all of these things right. I don't think one is better than the other. I think both are needed parallelly. Sustainability, profitability, ROI, growth, everything is very, very critical. I would rate them at par with each other.
How has TiE been so unique and useful in fostering entrepreneurship?
So as you all know, TiE is spread across the globe, 61 chapters. We have about 24, 25 chapters in the US, similar number in India, and the rest about 10, 15, 12 chapters across the globe. I think TIE is the best organization when it comes to promoting entrepreneurship. I think it's by far the best in the early stage, idea stage startup ecosystem. Our programs, which start to work from schools to colleges to women entrepreneurship to pitching competitions to business plan competitions, is very, very important and very critical, and it works through across different age groups, different sectors and different societies. And now the Angel program in the US and the Angel program in India actually puts in a culmination of all the education and mentoring that we have provided into an investment of sorts. So I think TIE is a great back-end. It used to be a great back-end education, mentoring and incubation provider and a networking organization. With the angel funding in place, now we actually are going to give you the first check. And what is important about the first check and the bandwidth that TIE has is that you have market access to various countries. Once you're a TIE invested company or a TIE mentored company, or you won a TIE competition at the school, college, university, or any other level, you really can leverage through your chapter or through the city that you're in and being part of that TIE chapter across the globe and reach out to many people if you need to have market access, if you need to have a fundraising across borders and continents. So I think it's very critical that, and it's a non-profit. I mean, it hardly charges you for a startup, I think anywhere from 5 to 15,000 rupees in India is your annual membership fees, and you get so many opportunities to network with yourselves and finally be able to reach out to events, learning experiences, and people across the globe. I think that's the best thing that TIE has to offer, and our outreach mostly in the US and India is our strongest point. And now with our investments in place, I think it's the best organization which is truly fostering entrepreneurship from idea level, seed level, school level to pre-series A, and that's what I think we have completed the whole cycle, which is investable and workable for everyone.
Well, we all know TIE network has tremendous amount of power. But what are your suggestions that how this power can be utilized towards the success of an entrepreneur?
See, again, as I said just now, you really nothing comes to you when you sit back and wait for things to come to you. You really have to reach out. And any organization that has networking at the core of its model, networking only happens if you leave and go out and meet. Networking only happens if you bring your hand out and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I do such and such things, and I really would want to be connected. You don't learn unless you ask questions. You don't network unless you come out and reach. You can't just be writing cold emails or messages and expect people to respond, because beyond a point, you really have to understand that you only get as much from a network as much as you give. And I think the best thing to do for you to do, in addition to becoming a member of TIE or finding the mentor at TIE, it's very critical that you reach out, you be part of events, you be part of discussions and debates, you be part of finding the right match for a people or from a person that could mentor you and help you and guide you. All these things are needed. So a lot of effort needs to be done. While we have programs, we have platforms, we have opportunities at TIE globally, you really need to optimally use it. I'll tell you, I've been part of TIE for 19 years now, and I think I have traveled across the globe. I was a non-tech, I'm now into tech, I'm angel investing, I understand everything that you can tell me about. I don't have a formal degree, but because I was strong enough, interested enough to be reaching out to people, to talking to people, to travel, to listen to people, to debate and discuss with people, I've learned so much. So I think as you get as much as you give, and I think it's very, very critical that you do that. Become part of the local chapter that you're in. Reach out to your local members first. See if they will help you reach out to other people outside of your chapter. The Angel program is a great program to help take benefit from. We're all very, very, once any leadership position that we acquire at TIE, whether at a chapter level or at a national level or a global level, we really have committed ourselves to give back to the member at large. So it's really very easy, and it's a great business card to have when you start off your LinkedIn message to any of us, or an email to us that you're a TIE member from such and such chapter, and that would get you a little more attention, a little more than what you would normally get, than what normally that person would give normally to a person that he or she doesn't know to. So it's really very important that you optimize it and use it, and use the programs. And there's, with the virtual world, and the last year being you really can attend events. You can, there are learning events happening in Silicon Valley to Singapore to Sydney. It's really very, very critical that you learn what you need. Follow the YouTube channel. There's recorded sessions also available. There's global summits that are happening. It's really very important. Listening to other people pitch, see how pitch decks are created, how communication is done. All that is a lot of hard work, and I think you can gain as much you give. And all I have to say is that a true startup or a true entrepreneur is someone who never loses faith and confidence in himself or herself. And in Hindi, as you say, hum haar nahi manenge. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you.